Okay. Hey guys, it's Chloe, and this is another episode of COVID Chats. I'm here with Lisa Congdon. How are you?
I'm doing really well, actually. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what day it is. I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah, I think that's the whole part of this pandemic. The time has become like completely relative.
True.
So, for those that don't know you, who are you? What's the way that you would describe yourself?
Well, most people know me as an artist and illustrator. That's sort of the thing that I'm known best for. But sort of in that capacity, I wear lots of hats. I'm an author. I've written and illustrated a number of books and then illustrated a bunch of books for other people. So that's kind of generally speaking how I spend a lot of my time.
Mhm.
I also work for clients doing illustration and some design work. Um, I teach online classes, sometimes in-person workshops on art, creative voice, creativity, business, that kind of stuff. Um, and what else? Oh, I have a fine art practice, which is sort of different than my illustration practice, which means I make original work that sells in galleries and kind of
Mm.
limited edition pieces as well. So yeah, so lots of different income streams. Um,
Also,
keep me busy.
swimming? Or
Uh,
there was some type of
well,
sport.
yeah, so that's sort of like the professional Lisa.
Uh-huh.
And then on the personal side, yeah, I'm pretty avid athlete. Right now, my sport of choice is cycling.
Okay.
So I'm a road cyclist. I ride with a women's team here in Portland. And but I have swum competitively my entire life. I stopped in 2006 because my art career started to sort of take over my life, and I needed to step away for a while. And then I ended up getting more into cycling later. But yeah, I've been an athlete my whole life. I am married to my wife Clay. I've been an out queer person since I was 23 years old, and I'm 52 now, so going on 30 years. So yeah, so I have two little dogs. I live in Portland, and yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's so
that's a lot
amazing.
about me. There's so much more, but
That's you scratched the surface.
yes, exactly.
Um, wow. So coming out at 23, what was that like? Because I know we had a conversation before over tea, and I felt I kind of came out around that same time. And it was very interesting to navigate, at least for me. I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to come out at 23 because you're not, I think that's actually kind of a typical age to come out because a lot of people, especially women, I think oftentimes men come out a little bit younger,
Mhm.
but I think that for a lot of us, we're too afraid to come out in high school or college, like it feels too vulnerable. Um, and so we wait until we're out. At least that's the way it was for me, or wait till we're out of school. I do think more and more young people are coming out younger and younger.
Mhm.
Um, and then, of course, a lot of people are coming out older and older too, because it's becoming something that's becoming more, sort of normalized.
Mhm.
But for me, this was 1991. So the world was a really different place at the time. And when think about, I was reflecting the other day because Pride Month just passed. And a few days ago, I wrote, like, every year I'll write a little story about my coming out, a different version of it. And this year I was reflecting on the fact that I came out in 1991. And I'm sort of astonished when I think about it how much bravery that took for me at the time, because we didn't have like the same celebrities or people in power or um, role models or you know all of the things that we have today. Like, there was not only no gay marriage, but there was no, very few gay politicians and very few
Mhm.
people represented on television. And so even for people like me who came from a pretty progressive home, my parents were pretty supportive when I came out, I was still terrified to be queer in, in the world. And I'm still sometimes terrified, and it's 2020, right? And so I think back like, oh my gosh, that, 30 years ago, I did this thing that even now feels like a big, brave leap for anybody, but especially back then. And I was really lucky, as I mentioned, I have some pretty great parents. And um, I kind of knew that I was gay from the time I was 13. I think that's like my earliest memory of having some awareness of being different.
Mm-hmm.
And I never would have come out at that age, but it's interesting because my niece, who's now 20, came out when she was 13, and like it was NBD, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, here I am. Who cares? I'm not even going to really talk about it because it's just, it's so normal for some young people these days. But for me, it was not at all. And so I remember like I used to get 17 magazine, and
Yeah.
I was, there was like this article, and it was like about how girl crushes were normal.
Mm-hmm.
And the subtext, they didn't say this, but the subtext was like, doesn't mean you're gay. And I just remember reading that and being like, thank God, I'm okay, So, so I kind of rode on that wave for a while, and I definitely dated boys in high school and college. And I liked them well enough, but there was always something missing for me. Like I would always just break up with them and like not feel this thing that I felt like I should be feeling. And I began to understand that these crushes were not just crushes. They were like real, true feelings for me.
Mm-hmm.
And after I graduated from college, I really started to allow myself to have a picture of what a life as a gay person might look like. I was really lucky, and this wasn't necessarily intentional, but I moved to San Francisco the day after I graduated from college, which was really serendipitous because you can't live in San Francisco, even in 1991
Mm-hmm.
or 1990 when I moved there, without being exposed to gay culture everywhere. And I had this roommate who I got hooked up with kind of randomly through another friend in college. We became good friends, and she had gay friends. And we would have parties at our apartment, and gay people would come over. And I started like, I befriended this woman, Gigi, and she like took me to my first gay bar. And so I came out to this intimate group pretty early. And then it was another year before I came out to my family. Um, and they were pretty great. Like I think back and, my mom was probably more concerned that I was going to be judged, and my dad was probably more concerned that I was going to be harmed. you know, they've sort of both had their different take, but they were both really loving towards me. And I was lucky because within a year, I got into a serious relationship with somebody I ended up staying with for almost a decade. And my parents really welcomed her into our family in a profound way. And I found out later that my mom had a lot of grieving because I was the kid that I think she thought like was going to have the husband and the 3 kids and give her grandchildren and the whole traditional life more than my brother and sister. And I think she really mourned the loss of this person that she thought I was going to be. But she kept that to herself. She didn't make me sort of take on the emotional labor of her feelings about that. And I really appreciate that in hindsight, that she really worked through that herself and didn't make it my problem.
Yeah.
And admitted that to me later. And as it turns out, I have this really pretty traditional, normal life. And my brother and sister gave her a bunch of grandkids. So
Okay.
it all worked out in the end. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that's beautiful that she told you later that she recognized that that's what was going on, and
Yeah.
she did that work to get there. That's amazing. And then
Yeah.
you met, and how long have you and Clay been together?
We have been together in September, it'll be 12 years.
Wow.
So that's my longest relationship. The woman that I was with in the 90s, like when I was younger, was almost 9 years. And then I had a few kind of shorter relationships between that one and my current relationship. lot of soul searching because I was picking the wrong people over and over and
Yeah.
over and over and over. And so I did a lot of work on myself in that kind of period. But yeah, we met on OkCupid, which
Cute.
I know, which is so it's kind of a great story. If you want to hear it.
Please share.
So OkCupid was a brand new app at the time, or it wasn't even an app. I think you just went on your computer because like iPhones were kind of just becoming a thing, 12 years ago. In fact, when I met her, I think I still had a Nokia
Oh my God.
flip phone or something. Oh boy, so much has changed in the last decade. So yeah, so I went on there, and what's interesting is, so I used to share an art studio with this other lesbian artist named Jamie, and we were both single, and we used to go have fun together and do stuff together, and we would date, and things weren't just not working out for either of us. And she's like, "Hey Lisa, there's this." I hadn't been online since, like, this is gonna show you how old I am. In the 90s, I went on the first online dating app called Planet Out. And like a lot of people listening probably don't even remember that. I don't even know if it still exists. It was like one of the first like LGBTQ websites. And there was like a dating thing. Like, and so I dated a few people on that. Nothing ever really worked out. But Jamie had been starting to date using different platforms. And she was like, "Hey, I found this platform. It's called OkCupid. It's for straight people and queer people. Seems really easy, and you have to answer all these questions, and they match you with people who you think, that politically and spiritually and all these things." And I was like, "That sounds great." She's like, "I just tried it. It seems really fun." So I was like, "What the hell? I've been single, like, or not in a serious relationship for like 4 years." So I filled it out, and within 24 hours, I got this message from Clay. And I didn't know her name at the time because you were just I don't know how they do it now, but like at the time you just knew somebody's username. It was for privacy issues in case, you didn't really end up wanting to meet that person. And she's like, "Hey, I had written this profile that was apparently very like, I'm a Capricorn, so this will make sense to other Capricorns, but it was very much like, this is who I am. This is what I'm looking for. Very clear, like no sexual hangups, like no addiction. Like I just put it out there. I was like, I don't care if I offend anybody. I'm just going to say what I want. And in a way, I realize now it's kind of manifesting, like, but so I had this very clear kind of precise picture. And it was much longer than what I just described, but you get the picture. And she writes me this message, and she's like, "I think that I meet all of your criteria."
How
That was really funny because I didn't think of it as criteria, but she was, I think, poking a little fun at me because I had written this very detailed description of the kind of person I was looking for and the kind of relationship I was looking for. And I said, "Oh, okay, we'll see about that." So we started chatting. We got to know each other a little bit, but within a week we had set up a date, and I met her. I would say within 2 hours we were making out. Within a week we decided to date seriously. We like took our profiles down, and that was that. So neither of us had dated anybody else using OkCupid. So it was like we met instantaneously, and that was that. We didn't go through a lot of the like uncomfortable, awkward stuff that you go through when you first start online dating. And which is why I kind of had avoided it for so long, because I didn't want to go through that discomfort. But she had been single less time than me, but was also pretty clear about what she wanted, and we just really meshed. And that's not to say there hasn't been like a million things we've had to work on in our relationship, or that we were totally perfectly suited for each other from the beginning. But it is to say that there was a strong enough connection immediately that it kind of worked out, and we were both willing to do the work involved. So yeah. 12 years.
Story 12 years later.
I know.
I love it.
And interestingly, Jamie, my former studio mate, met someone like 2 months later, and they ended up getting married the week after we did and are still together, and now they have a baby. So
Aw,
yeah,
it
so
all
we are
worked
both kind
out.
of like OkCupid success stories.
You should get a sponsorship because
Yeah,
that's
totally.
a good one. Do you have any, let's say, dating advice for those who just came out that are like, how do I know who is gay and who is not? Because that's something I always hear. And it's like, I mean, and then there's the whole, oh, I fell for a straight woman or, those types of things. So how did you navigate? How would you now in now's like dating era? What are some advice that you would give?
I have a particular type, and my type is like very much tomboy. So for me, it's usually pretty obvious. But I know for a lot of, like for Clay, that was like, or for people who date more feminine women,
Mhm,
and I fall into that category. I think it's really hard sometimes to
mhm,
know. And and so, I mean, I'm a fan of like being direct. So I have another good story for you. I turned 50 a couple of years ago, and I had a big birthday party. And I invited like all my friends from my life, like who I've stayed close to. And I had this really close friend named Diana. And Diana and I were friends from San Francisco, and she had moved to Nevada City. She's a ceramics artist, and she was living there. So neither of us lived in San Francisco anymore, but she had only dated men, never considered herself gay or even queer identifying at all. And she shows up at my birthday party, and so does my friend Cindy, who's clearly gay, kind of fits the stereotype.
yeah.
And so Cindy sees Diana and is like, oh my gosh, this woman is beautiful. I like developed a crush on her instantly. I guess they were both on the team, the setup team, like before the party. And
Mhm.
but in the back of her mind, Cindy's like, how do I know if she's gay or not? So she could have asked me, but she didn't. She was just sort of like, didn't didn't want to, make too big of a deal out of it. So at the party later on that night, she starts flirting with Diana, asks her to dance, brings her cake, and Diana just tells her outright, because it's clear Cindy's flirting with her. She's like, I'm not gay, you know.
Oh,
And I think you're great, and we can dance, and I'm cool with this, but just so you know.
yeah.
And Cindy's like, okay, that's fine, and just continues to flirt with her and dance with her. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers, and now they've been in a relationship for over 2 years.
Oh.
So I guess my point, the message to the story is, just because somebody does, I mean, Diana's a particularly open person, and
Mhm,
was like, had fell in love with Cindy, and now really, I think, identifies more as a queer person,
mhm,
because she's realized that this part of herself was sort of untapped before, and she and Cindy had this really beautiful relationship. But I also think that another lesson to be learned is just to be clear.
mhm.
And, Cindy was still willing to sort of pursue her. I think in the end, if Diana was irritated, that she would have told Cindy, and Cindy would have backed off, but, it worked out. And so sometimes people just need time to sort of wrap their heads around what it means to date a woman. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think it's really just important to like put it out there in the beginning, what you're looking for, and ask questions that are uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and see where it goes.
and
I
there's
mean, I
something
feel like
to be
even
said
with
about
friendships, sometimes I kind of want to know. I have a lot of straight friends, but I kind of want to know sometimes, even being friends with somebody, are you like, I ride on a cycling team, and sometimes new women will show up to ride with us. And I'm always trying to gauge, like, are you gay? Are you
Yeah,
straight? It's just
yeah.
an interesting thing about people. So,
Even in friendships, I think I do the same. I ask because it's almost like you don't have to explain certain experiences or certain nuances or whatever if you know you have that commonality. So then I kind of like navigate what I'm gonna, explain or talk about. Just if they're straight or and I think that's great about your story. I think there's a lot to be said about labels. Maybe your friend Diana
mhm.
um, maybe just didn't see yourself as like a lesbian, and maybe like sometimes some people only know bisexual, lesbian, and but now it's like you can be queer, which could mean whatever you want.
That's
You can
right.
be fluid. You can, there's so many different things, and you probably maybe just didn't see that there were other options as well.
Yeah, or like knew that there were options for other people, but didn't recognize them in herself. Like when she found herself falling for my other friend, like I think it opened something up in her. And those stories I think are particularly common with older women.
Hmm.
So I've known a lot. I actually have a handful of friends who now identify as either lesbian or queer who didn't come out until their 40s.
Mm.
And I have one friend who's in her 50s. And I think for some of those women, they knew all along that they were maybe queer, although they might not have like publicly identified that way. Like they knew they liked women, but it was more sort of socially acceptable for them to date men, or they were married and they were like, this is just how my life is.
Yeah.
I want to have a more traditional relationship. And then after a while, they were like, it's like there's this way in your 40s that you kind of come to know yourself in this and it's profound. Like
Mhm.
it's kind of this really exciting time, and it keeps getting deeper and deeper the older you get, and you get really comfortable with who you are, and you stop caring what people think, and you stop worrying that like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm worried I'm going to be shamed or rejected by others. Like I just want to be happy, so I'm going to do what I want to do. And I don't think, at least in my generation, like when I was younger, I came out young, but even so, I was still super homophobic about myself and fearful and all these things that I no longer feel, or I don't feel as much. And I think a lot of older women come out who might have come out years ago or might have understood that they're bisexual or whatever, but they just are so comfortable with themselves that they allow themselves to feel these things that they never would have allowed when they were younger. I don't know if you can identify with that at all. Like,
Mhm.
just sort of like how we kind of get more comfortable in our own skin the older we get.
Yeah, I've always said I think that 20s is who am I?
Yes.
30s is performance of, okay, I found my craft, or, and how can I
Yep.
do best? And then 40s is acceptance of like, this is who I am, this is how it's going to be. And like, at least a little bit more about how you want things to look. Which,
Exactly. And it's not always easy or
mhm.
completely like fluid, but I think that like in my 40s, I like bumped up against all these sort of things that I told myself about who I was and how I needed to be in the world, and got more and more and more comfortable with um I don't know, just like, okay, that might be disappointing to this person or that person, or I might not get approval, or I might feel uncomfortable in this situation, but I still have to be myself.
Mhm.
And then I would try being myself and realize that like that person actually didn't judge me and people still liked me. And you're not ever as sort of able to do that if when you're younger. I think it takes really mature, stronger young person um to get to that place of being brave. When you're older, it's much easier. And so, I mean, that's for anybody listening who's younger, like it does get better. It does get easier for sure.
Yeah. Well, wow. Thank you so much. It's funny. It's always interesting going into these chats where, you think you have a template for something, and then you just kind of just let it go. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people that are, I mean, Pride just ended, but there's still a lot of questions left. There's still a lot of searching and for answers. But I think that you're an amazing, strong figure that people can look up to, and kind of, you know, um, representation is everything, and they can
Yeah.
realize you as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I want to put all your links to everything in bio so people can see your art, your illustrations, your books. You have, what is it, 8 books now?
Something like that.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
More to come too. Yeah, I actually have a book comes out next year. It's called You Will Leave a Trail of Stars. And it is kind of a book of life advice about um, like living in your truth.
Mhm.
Um, because that's something that so many of us don't figure out until we're older. And yet it's so important when you're in your teens and 20s and 30s. Um, and I want to inspire people to just be strong and brave and really be who they are in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this episode and giving me so much of your time.
My
Hopefully we
pleasure.
will connect
Yeah,
and tea or social distance park hangout or something.
I know that would be really fun. I have a new puppy and she's pretty adorable. So
Why?
I know. Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll have to have a play date then.
Oh
Let's
my
do
God,
it.
I love it. Okay, well, you take care and I'll
Thanks,
talk to you
Chloe. Thanks for
soon.
having me.
Bye.
Bye.